Fun facts. My name is Prachi. It's currently 5:45 in the morning. I'm low-key dying of illness. I don't have a fun fact, and this is my long overdue October check-in for my no-buy year. Folks, I'm so sorry for missing my video upload last week. I just literally did not have a voice. I was just ill and bedridden and sounding like a chain smoker, and my voice is kind of 70 to 80% of the way there. I have this cup of green tea with lemon and honey in it to hopefully sustain me through the entirety of this video. It's obscenely early. There might be some residual NyQuil in my system. I also woke up, and because I've just been sick and kind of rubbing my eyes and stuff, I had a bunch of blotchy redness on my eyes and cheeks. And instead of trying to cover it up or run away from it, I decided to just pull a Sheryl Sandberg and lean in. So here we are. I have completely phoned this makeup look in. I'm using the same product on my eyes, cheeks, and lips. This outfit also phoned in. I'm in my pajama bottoms and my pajama top. I've just thrown on earrings and a scarf to give the illusion of some color and life. Appearance-wise, I'm really phoning it in today, but you know what I'm not phoning in? The content. Whew. Queen of segues. And that's because while I was on what felt like my deathbed, I had a lot of time to sit and think and reflect on my past month, on my relationship with makeup, on where I wanted it to go, and all of that kind of stuff. And in my feverish delirium, I jotted down all of those thoughts in a notebook. Now, if I went over every single epiphany that I had, we would be here for 3 hours. I would sound like a chain smoker. Nobody wants that. So what I've decided to do for the sake of this particular October check-in is discuss the following 3 things. First of all, I just kind of want to discuss my October a little bit, and the fact that during October, I was on the struggle bus, hardcore, and kind of how being on the struggle bus, going through a really tough period in your life, affects my relationship to beauty and the urge that I have to shop. The second thing that I want to address is sort of surrounding the language of a no-buy. And the last thing that I want to discuss, time and my vocal cords permitting, are the thoughts that I've kind of been having around what I want my relationship with makeup to look like in the future after my no-buy year ends. Because, recap, my no-buy runs from February 5th, 2019 to February 5th, 2020, which means that I'm well over 9 months into my no-buy now. We're 75% of the way done. So I have been thinking a lot about what I want to do after that. What do I want my relationship with shopping and makeup to look like once I'm allowed to buy stuff, etc., etc. So we'll get into all of that. This check-in is weeks overdue. The bread is stale and rock hard, but you know what? We're gonna get it anyway. So let's get it. Alright, so first up, let's discuss October. As you may have guessed from my last couple of videos and what I just said, I was on the struggle bus hardcore during October, bleeding into the early part of November. And it was not a normal struggle bus, it was a spooky struggle bus. It was I just woke up one morning and I was on the struggle bus and I had no idea how I got there. And I was I don't want to be on this bus, let me get off this bus. But as I looked around, I realized that there were literally no emergency stop buttons, no cords. There was no way for me to get the bus to stop. And in fact, upon closer inspection, the bus didn't even have a door. It was just windows and windshield. There was no way out. I was just stuck on the bus for what seemed like forever. This nightmare hellscape struggle bus. It was relentless back to back in October. There was the suicide of a celebrity I had greatly admired and followed since I was 16 years old, followed very closely by a death in my own family, followed by the realization that one of the courses I wanted to take canceled. The only other alternative conflicted with another class I already had, which meant that I would not be graduating in June 2020 the way that I had planned, and that I would instead have to pay an additional $1,000+, take a course in the summer, and graduate in October. Which, by the way, the October graduation, they don't even have a ceremony. They just mail you your diploma, and that's that on that. On top of that, it started getting really cold, daylight savings time has ended, so the clocks have gone back an hour, and that's just bare bones outline of all all the garbage going on, keep in mind that I'm still like a student with like midterms and papers and quizzes and all of that kind of stuff, as all of this like external like mess is happening in my personal life. So I don't know like what it was. Astrology folks keep saying something about like Mercury being in Gatorade. Like, sure, let me just blame the stars and the planets for the mess that was my life in October. Oh, and the cherry on top of this garbage Sunday, because let's just get TMI, is that I have been so stressed and I have been stress eating so much that I have somehow gained like 25 pounds in the last 2.5 months. My period has stopped coming, and FYI, I am not pregnant. In fact, if I am pregnant, we need to alert the heads of all the major religions because we're about to have another virgin birth, folks. I think my hormones are just all out of whack because of like the stress and the weight gain, and what that also means is that I have been having like the worst acne breakouts I have ever had since I got off of Accutane like 3 years ago. So even my physical appearance and self-confidence took like a heavy beating in the month of October. For the first time in my life, I weigh more than 200 pounds. I get winded going up like one flight of steps. Like, I was like not doing well for most of September, big chunk of October, leading into the first part of November, right? And the thing that I specifically want to talk about is how all of this affected my relationship with makeup and beauty and wanting to buy makeup and beauty items. It was the most fascinating and paradoxical thing, because I would basically, throughout the month of October, shift back and forth between two really extreme poles. At one end of the spectrum, there was like real shit going on in my life. There was like death and grief and loss. There's also the fact that the trajectory of my entire 2020 has drastically changed because I'm no longer graduating in June. I was gonna take like 2 months off in the summer, study really hard for my LSAT, apply for jobs all across Canada and the eastern seaboard of the US. I had like the first 6 months or so of 2020 like all planned out, and then some like freaking John Steinbeck-esque best laid plans of mice and men move, like all of that is dust in the wind, right? None of it matters anymore. I know this may seem like something really inconsequential to a bunch of people, but like the fact that I'm not going to be able to graduate in an actual ceremony, that affected me more than I think it necessarily would have, in large part because like I have been trying to complete my undergrad since September of 2012. And so for me to have like that ceremony, to be able to like graduate with a cohort of people, have like the cap and the gown and the diploma, like I had put a lot of significance on that, and that was kind of taken away from me. And so like the psychological aspect of that, like that expectation being subverted, like that hit me really hard. So there's been a lot of like real life problems, real life shit going on. And in the midst of all of that like real life shit, there has been this loud and overwhelming voice in my head that is just like, what the hell does makeup matter? Like the pretty blushes and eyeshadow palettes and skincare products and foundations that I like want to buy, like none of them matter. Personal grief and loss plus real life academic stressors that heavily impact my future, like their weight and significance far outweighs anything that makeup and beauty could possibly provide, right? Like there has been, over the last 2 months, so much drama going on in the beauty community. I forget everyone's giving their hot take on those like Anastasia Norvina palettes, and Jaclyn Hill just announced that she's, you know, coming out with a highlighter collection, and there's been the whole like Shane Dawson, Jeffree Star thing going on. None of that shit matters. I want to pause here and say that like, I'm not saying that if like you followed all of those things or you have hot takes or you were interested in any of that stuff that you're like shallow or vain or wasting your time or anything. Not at all. Like it's completely valid to follow all of that stuff. But for me and the October that I was having, all of the shit going down in the beauty community, all of the talk of like new releases and drama and all of that, it just seemed like pathetic and tiny and shallow and irrelevant to my life. About 50% of the time in October, I lived in that space where, and pardon my French, like I could not give one iota of a fuck about the beauty community and what the newest makeup was and what makeup items I had put on my wish list and what things I had wanted to buy and anti-hauls and beauty consumerism and all of that kind of stuff, because it was like, life had its foot on my fucking throat. And when you're choking and gasping for breath and like just barely trying to survive, the makeup that you're wearing on your face doesn't matter. And yet, the remaining 50% of the time, I lived at the complete opposite end of the spectrum. The remaining 50% of the time in October and November, I was obsessively throwing myself into the beauty community and all of its like petty insignificantness. Here's the thing I haven't really talked about on the channel so far, but I really want the Jackie Aina palette. I've wanted it ever since it came out. In the month of October, I watched every single review of the Jackie Aina palette by a person even closely approximating my skin tone. Huda Beauty Neon Orange palette, I also watched every single tutorial and first impressions and review of that palette by anyone even vaguely close to my skin tone. I spent an inordinate amount of time obsessing over which one of those Cover FX blushes was the perfect one and which one of those I would buy first things first the moment my no-buy year ended. I watched every single hot take video on the Anastasia Beverly Hills Norvina release schedule hoopla. Initially, I couldn't reconcile those opposing sides of me. I couldn't reconcile how 50% of the time I was like, makeup really does not matter in the grand scheme of life. It's just like powder, dust, and goop that you put on your face. But then the other 50% of the time, I was throwing myself intensely into researching, obsessing about, thinking about that powder, dust, and goop that I had previously realized was so insignificant. I realized that I wasn't obsessing over wanting to buy makeup and skincare during the month of October despite it being petty and insignificant and not a thing that mattered in the grand scheme of life, but precisely because it was petty and insignificant and did not matter in the grand scheme of life. I talked about this a bit in my 6-month overall very emotional check-in about my makeup no-buy, but one of the ways in which I really use makeup is as an escape. When life itself is really ugly, it feels nice to turn to the world of beauty, right? It feels nice to distract myself with thoughts of bright, sparkly, pretty things. It's quite literally a beautiful escape. And as I've been sitting and thinking about it a little bit more over the last week and a half or so, the thing that I've come to realize is it's not just that it's a beautiful escape. For me, it's also fundamentally about control. A lot of October was out of my control. I don't get to decide who lives and dies, who gets sick and doesn't get sick, whether a university decides to cancel a class or not. I don't get to control when the sun sets, when it gets dark outside. I don't get to decide when my mental health gets to act up or not, when my depression flares up, when my ADHD symptoms are at their worst. Those are things that aren't really in my control. And at times when life is just throwing a bunch of junk at me that is outside of my control, makeup and beauty becomes a safe haven because it has always represented to me a form of very tight control. I am literally physically controlling my face and my appearance when I choose to wear makeup. When I feel like my life is unruly or uncontrollable, I escape to the world of makeup in an effort to sort of re-exert some of that control. And also because it is an escape, because it is insignificant. Finding the right blush, the right eyeshadow, the perfect red lipstick, it is not a thing that matters in the grand scheme of life. Trying to decide which Cover FX blush is the ideal one to have, even if I make the wrong decision, that is a low stakes decision. It's kind of an irrelevant decision in the grand scheme of my life. And it is comforting and so much easier to escape into the world of beauty where all decisions are like that. These low stakes decisions that don't really matter, right? Because how bad is a bad eyeshadow palette in the long run? If you spend $10 on a lipstick and it sucks, it's not the end of the world. How much is it really gonna affect your life? Whereas the adult level decisions that I need to make in my life, decisions around my physical health, around my mental health, around what classes I should be taking when I'm graduating, those decisions have heft and weight. Like, of course I just wanted to think about the Norvino Pro Pigment palette and whether Colourpop is releasing too many things or whatever other inane beauty drama comes out every single week. The side of my brain that realized that makeup is just like an irrelevant pastime, and the side of my brain that just wanted to sink into that irrelevant pastime, they're two sides of the same coin. And that's something that I had a lot of difficulty sort of pinpointing previously in my life. I can see the mechanism fully now. I can see how it plays out. That, you know, during times of stress, I will alternately feel like makeup is completely unimportant and also like the most important and absorbing thing in the world. And being aware that that is like a distorted pattern of thinking born out of like my urge to try and control my circumstances or escape like whatever horrible garbage is going on in life. Having that increased awareness is like the first step to me being like, okay, you know what we're not gonna do this time? This. So that was point number one. That took up so much time. My throat is like killing me. The second thing that I wanted to discuss, and it's sort of linked to this idea of control, it's around language. So one of the things I've been doing is I've been going back through my old videos and seeing if I like missed any stray comments. So if you like left a comment for me like 3 months ago or something like that, and you see me give it like a heart notification now, know that I'm like trying to just like catch up and respond to all of my comments from the start of my channel. And the way that I've been doing that is instead of using YouTube's like built-in comment system or whatever, I've just been like opening up all of my old videos and scrolling down and looking through the comments, and the video actually starts to play in the background as it does that. The point of me telling you this is that this is actually like the first time I had like gone back to actually hear myself speak, right? Because I have never rewatched any of my videos. Like once I upload it, like it's done. But like hearing myself talk over a bunch of these videos for the first time, it was like I wasn't even listening to myself. It was like I was listening to somebody else. And so I was able to observe this like particular word choice that I kept saying over and over and over again as I introduced my no buy year. And that would be this. I would say, right, so I'm on like a makeup and beauty no buy, and from February 5th, 2019 to February 5th, 2020, I am not allowed to buy makeup, skincare, hair care, blah, blah, whatever. And I said this over and over and over again. Like every single time I introduced my no buy year, I introduced it with, I am not allowed to XYZ. I am not allowed to buy makeup. I am not allowed to buy skincare. I am not allowed to do whatever. And maybe it's just like the copious amounts of Dayquil and NyQuil I have been taking, but I've been thinking a lot about the choice of the word allowed. Allowed implies permission. Allowed implies gatekeeping. I am not allowed by whom? Who is not allowing me to buy stuff, right? What like invisible force or entity am I apparently trying to fight, and the entity's telling me that I am not allowed to do this, and I'm like, no, but I want to. Whenever I use the phrase, I'm not allowed, what I have inadvertently been doing is framing my decision to go on a no buy as some sort of like externally imposed deprivation. Somebody is not allowing me to buy makeup, skincare, hair care. It's external and it's being imposed on me like a weird restriction or a deprivation. I don't know if this will necessarily ring true for any of y'all, but I just found that like my choice of like I am not allowed to was really kind of affecting me in a way where it almost like disempowered me. And the big sort of like realization that I have had is like, it's not that I'm not allowed to buy makeup, skincare, hair care, perfumes, books, candles, whatever. Like, it's not illegal. Like, no one's gonna like crack down on me with like the whip or like a huge fine or throw me in jail if I buy any of those things. I am choosing not to buy makeup, skincare, hair care, books, perfumes, candles. That is my choice. It's my decision. When I'm like, oh, I'm not allowed to like what, it's like I physically kind of like shrink myself. I diminish my own role in my no buy. I diminish my own role as an agent in my life versus when I'm like, I'm choosing to go on a year-long no buy. I'm choosing not to buy makeup, skincare, hair care, perfume, books, and candles. I'm like physically standing taller. Like I feel a sense of pride. I feel a sense of like involvement and agency. I'm like, hell yeah, like I'm the boss. Like I'm the captain now. And it is like the smallest slightest linguistic shift from I am not allowed to I am choosing to. And just that little shift, that little like reframing of the situation that I am currently in, where instead of it being like a disempowering one where it feels like somebody else like imposed rules on me, it's an empowering one because like I chose to do this. It has given me like so much strength and fortitude when it comes to my no buy year. This is not a deprivation. This is not a punishment. This is a choice that I am making to better my own life and to be the person that I want to be. I don't know if I'm just like much more susceptible to like language and framing, that like just the tiniest like linguistic hack, so to speak, psychologically made me feel so much better. But I mean, I think that that has power, right? Like I think a lot about how one of the first things that a therapist ever told me, and I think about it like every single day, is the distinction between I am depressed and I have depression. That is also what seems like a very marginal and tiny linguistic distinction. But what it does for you psychologically, what it at least did for me psychologically, was huge. And that's kind of the same thing that has happened to me over the last month or so with I'm not allowed to buy stuff versus I'm choosing not to buy stuff. Alrighty, so that's that section. It's like really getting hot in this bathroom now, and the construction noises have begun next door because they're building like an entire like condo. But I have a refill on my tea, and hopefully I will be able to get this final point out before either my voice or the battery runs out. My voice is actually, I think, gonna give out before my battery does, so I think I'm gonna do like a Cliff Notes version of this and maybe address this a little bit more in my like November check-in, because that's gonna be happening in literally like 2 weeks or so. I've been thinking a lot about like what I want to do after my no buy year ends, and so here's my rule when I'm like trying to make decisions about my future, because like I'm a firm believer in that Friedrich Nietzsche quote, which I'm probably like misquoting and paraphrasing horribly, but it goes something like, he who has a why can endure almost any how. Like if you know why you are doing something, the reason for doing something, it makes going through like whatever trials and tribulations come up so much more bearable. Figuring out the why is the key to like figuring out what to do next and then how to do it. And when I stop and I take a step back and I reflect on like why I really wanted to go on a no buy, I've realized that the solutions that people like Hannah Louise Poston or like Zane Son, for example, have, which is to say the beauty budget post their no buy year, that is not a solution that really aligns with my particular why. A lot of the why for Hannah Louise Poston's no buy year had to do with like finances and fiscal responsibility and making sure that she did not live beyond her means in terms of like her love of beautiful things in this world, right? Or at the very least, that's how I interpreted it. The financial impact of like buying beauty stuff was not the most stressful thing when it came to me. The thing that actually physically really stressed me out was the amount of stuff. When I am surrounded by too much stuff, I feel really restless, I feel really anxious, I don't feel comfortable. And the fact that having too much stuff causes me anxiety, coupled with the fact that I had like an impulse control problem where I was constantly buying things because my ADHD was not under control, that meant that I was stuck in like really vicious cycles of buying, getting really stressed, decluttering, buying, getting really stressed, decluttering. One of my overarching goals, and I've said this like multiple times on my channel, is to have a makeup collection where I know what every single piece of makeup in my collection is and how it performs. I don't want to be stressed by the amount of space makeup is taking up in my life. I don't want to be stressed by the amount of stuff I have associated with makeup, skincare, hair care, etc. The underlying why of my makeup no buy is to fundamentally reshape and reassess my relationship to stuff. Instead of impulsively buying, I want to buy very mindfully. Instead of impulsively decluttering, I want to be at a stage where I do not need to declutter anymore. The only time I declutter an item is when it literally like expires on me, because everything that I have acquired with great thought and care and restraint. I want only enough makeup and beauty items that I treat each thing like a beautiful, precious jewel that I use all the way to the end of its lifespan. And so the project that I think I have settled on for myself in the year 2020, at the very least from February 5th, 2020, all the way through the end of 2020, I think I'm tentatively gonna call it 20 in 20. So the idea would be that I would be allowed to buy 20 sort of beautiful objects in the year 2020. I would still be on, for all intents and purposes, what is kind of like a replacement only no buy. Because let's say in the year 2020, I do actually run out of like every single moisturizer that I own. If I have to go out and I then buy one moisturizer, I don't want to count that as one of my 20 things. Because that is like a logical, I hesitate to use the word necessary because like how much of makeup and skincare is really necessary, part of my life. However, if, for example, I still have 2 moisturizers like lounging around in my house, and then some brand releases like a moisturizer that sounds amazing, I can choose as one of my like 20 items that I am allotted during the year 2020 to buy that new moisturizer as a thing that I want to try. And one of the really interesting things about my no buy this year is that it has not included nail polish, clothing, or earrings, because I don't really have a shopping problem when it comes to those 3 things. However, for my 2020 project, I would actually want to include clothing, earrings, and nail polish as well. And I think that project, where it's like I'm allowed 20 beautiful things across this hugely broad category, makeup, skincare, hair care, nail care, perfumes, candles, clothes, earrings, and jewelry. If I'm only allowed to buy like 20 things in a year, then I have to actually make some hard choices around like what categories of things I even want to focus on. I have to decide like what deserves one of the 20 precious spots. Is it like that Cover FX blush that I really want? Or is it actually the beautiful pair of earrings that I've wanted for like over a year now? It forces me to sort of prioritize not just within the world of makeup and beauty, but across multiple arenas of my life to figure out which beautiful things, so to speak, I really care about. So I'm still like workshopping it a little bit in my head. I don't know, if you guys have like thoughts and suggestions or feedback, that would be really awesome, because I know like not everybody who's watching me is necessarily on a replacement only no buy. Some of you are on low buy, some of you are on like reverse rouges or really fascinating projects, and I really want to hear about like what are ideas that you guys have beyond just like a beauty budget for projects that reshape your relationship with things and how much you value things, and not having like a huge unnecessary amount of fluff stuff that you like surround yourself with. So I'm really curious to know about that. I'm also really curious to know how you guys' October and hell November, because we're like 3 weeks into November now, has been so far. Please let me know down in the comments. My voice is about to die, my battery light is blinking, so I'm gonna leave you here. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great upcoming week. And even if the rest of your week ends up becoming messy or imperfect, I hope that you're still able to create and experience some truly beautiful moments. Thanks for watching. Bye.